Alrighty, welcome back to another video. So the Soul Exchange is back. Um, I think it was quite random that they came up with this. I think it's a little bit early as well. I think we weren't expecting a Soul Exchange until at least another month, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a good welcome, I guess. Now, obviously, I think we know from the previous trends of Soul Exchanges that the heroes that are usually in Soul Exchange are not the heroes of the latest meta, but at the same time, there are some gems that you can find here in the Soul Exchange where you can potentially use for, just improving war teams. Not necessarily for defense. I don't think any of the Soul Exchange heroes, apart from when Ludwig and Ulfric was featured, that you can actually use on defense. So, as usual, 10 heroes required, 15 heroes required, 20 heroes required. You are required to spend the amount of 5 stars in order to get one of those heroes in any one of those rows. So 10 gives you the first row, 15 that you trade in gives you the second row, and the last row requires 20 5-star heroes. Now I want to do something different here. I am going to go through all the heroes really fast, and then I'm just going to offer my thoughts on which heroes are potentially the best among each of these rows. I don't really want to go through all the heroes in too much detail. So let's look at the first row first. Econia. Now, Econia is one of the super elemental heroes, so it's relatively new. However, I do believe this is part of the if I'm not mistaken, this is part of either the first or second iteration. I don't exactly remember. But I remember pulling and getting Econia, and she was really good when they were, the presence of legendary troops were not there at that time being, where her fiends could actually melt holy enemies pretty fast. But with the presence of legendary troops, her effectiveness of the fiends have actually gone down quite a bit. It would actually take a long time before you could actually melt down any one of these holy heroes. And, right now in the current meta, you're seeing a lot of Costume Zhuge you're seeing a lot of Shimmer Scale, Lemonwood. I think these are like the main 3 holy heroes that are on defense. So Econia can actually be useful here. I'm just a bit worried because that 250% attack from the fiends is actually not dealing as much damage as you think it would. I think I tested this out in a raid team, and it's only about 300 to 400 damage, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It's about 300-ish damage. I think the max you can get is about 300 damage. So not as effective as before, but something that you can use for I think it's like a support to other fiend makers as well. So you could use Econia together with something like Amethyst if you have Amethyst as well, and that could severely impact their healing. And at the same time, if you're going against a yellow heavy defense, then you can try to consider using Econia. Now I have Econia at the first limit break. I didn't push her to the second limit break, but she is pretty decent. Fast speed is always a welcome sight, and whenever you use super elemental heroes for offense, remember that the troop mastery actually helps a lot in terms of dealing more damage to the holy enemies, and taking less damage from holy enemies as well. So interesting first pick here. Second one, Nemesis. Now, Nemesis is a bit dated ever since they discontinued the Styx Towers. But with the ability to basically deal damage whenever enemies gain abnormal amounts of mana, which means you're getting mana increase from either a special skill, status effect, whether is it like a minion spawning and you gain mana, so you can stop that, or you can just like deal damage through that. But the 250 damage is not that much when again you need to factor in legendary troops, because legendary troops increase the HP by quite a bit, and those minions are actually quite big as well. So the second charge, not really what you want to see. I think all enemies are immune to new status effect buffs for 3 turns. Actually quite interesting, honestly. You can actually use this and test it out together with some of the other heroes as well if you can get, because remember Styx heroes, the second charge takes about 9 tiles without any help from mana troops. So if you have mana, I think if you're using legendary troops at 11% mana bonus, I don't think it impacts it that much. But essentially Styx heroes are one of those where you don't really need a mana troop in order for them to function at 6, 9 and 12 tiles required depending on the charge. So Nemesis is really strong in this particular role, and I would say I think one of the top picks if you're at 10 heroes required. So Zenobia, it's only for Titans. I don't see her in a war team. Really don't think you should be wasting a soul exchange just for Zenobia, especially when you're looking at Titan teams where you could easily replace Zenobia with Costume Wilbur. If you're not looking to min-max or try to go for really, really high scores in Titans, Zenobia is not a necessity. In fact, I have Zenobia and I don't even use Zenobia for regular Titans. Even for Mythic Titans, I rarely use Zenobia. So there's something to consider. I don't think Zenobia is something that you should trade in for. Like, you would rather pick either Nemesis or Iconia over Zenobia. But again, this is my opinion as well as the level that I'm playing at. But even then, if you're cheap to play or you're free to play, really I think you don't really find much need for Zenobia. Remember that Zenobia deals damage only to the edges of the formation. So in early war, in the early part of your war offense, when you're starting your war flag, there's the strategy for hitting the edges is not as comprehensive as just outright damage to a side. So this is something that you will need to theory craft and see if there's any other heroes that you can pair this with, and then hopefully from there you try to make it work. So not really a fan of choosing Zenobia for soul exchange here. Julius is interesting. So Julius, when he first came out, I don't think that many people were really interested in him. But now with the legendary troops, you get this minion where you can get a permanent 20% mana generation boost, and his fiends actually deal quite a bit of damage and requires quite a bit of health to absorb. 60% health required before it disappears. So you can actually kind of use Julius to really, really strong effect, especially when he has this uncleansable negative 38% mana generation as long as the fiend is on the opponent. So I think there is a chance that he will remain relevant in the meta moving forward if you can get past the fact that his stats are a little bit dated. And it's really hard to justify double limit breaking him as well, because Fiend Resist pretty much sucks here. And I just wish that this passive damage on special wasn't damage on special. It was more to mana generation for your team. That would really make him go over the top. But it's actually a really, really decent pick. I have Julius as well, and I'm still trying to figure out a team where I can fit this in when going against Diao Chan, because this is one of those utility heroes that can't be affected by Diao Chan's minion stealing stuff, and at the same time, once you get the fiends on, it's actually quite difficult to get rid of. So really, really interesting hero, and one of the, I would say, better picks as well in the 10 hero slot. Like, between Nemesis and Julius, these two are, I think, potentially one of the hottest picks that you can pick from the first slot. Liadria being a hero of the month. Now if you have pulled enough during the month where Liadria is out, I would wager a guess that, you know, most people, even cheap to play, would have already gotten Liadria. I'm not a big fan of Liadria, just because she doesn't do much. I mean, all ally special skill deal an additional 20% damage for 4 turns is not really what you want to see on a support. I mean, if it gives a bit more damage, that would be nice, but 20% damage is negligible. I think if you pair it with the element link, I guess it's 30%, but I mean, honestly, if you have a chance to choose between Julius and Nemesis, I think it's really hard not to choose those two and trying to pick Liadra here. I mean, sure, you get a 30% HP minion, which is actually quite big if you consider legendary troops. But other than that, it's nothing much. I mean, boost 100 health, you might as well use Hulda, right? So I'm not really a fan of Liadra here, especially when those minions can be removed. So yeah, I think for the first row, it's definitely between Nemesis or Julius here. Really hard not to choose anyone other than those two. Alright, so let's look at the second row. Becky, look, I'm going to be honest. When Becky first came out, I didn't really see too much utility in the form of Becky. I really thought Becky was, you know, really like whatever. It's like a whatever hero. And then I think Glitterwest kind of did a really nice team with Becky, and I saw how you could utilize Becky to good effect, especially with Hippo. But the stats, outdated stats, and the fact that you need 12 tiles in order to get the second mana charge, it's gonna be a bit hard. So not really a fan of Becky, even though she does quite a bit, in terms of utility. And then on the second charge, you can just try to kill the whole team by firing your skills over and over. Constance, look, let's face it, with Dodge is slowly moving out to the point where I think even folks are not too scared of Sha Wujing anymore. So with Sha Wujing, I don't see the need for having Constance here. I mean, she's a musketeer, sure, but again, it's really hard for you to choose someone that deals very little damage and having a 45% chance to dodge. Well, the good thing is you're dodging special skills, so you're dodging any type of special skills. So that means it's different when you have something like Sha Wujing or Costume Freya, where you dodge special skills that deal damage. So this is slightly different. But again, yeah, dodge. I mean, if you're going against Lemonwood and you're trying to bring Constance, well, that's not going to happen because the Astral Elves kind of cannot miss. So, yeah, not really a fan of picking dodge heroes. Like all these dodge heroes like Constance, Bastet, Cadillac, Sha Wujing, they're pretty much, at the point where they're just running a bit obsolete. And there's going to be like a new form of dodge which I think is way better. So yeah, I'm not really a fan of Constance here. Flip is interesting. Now, I used to think that Flip kind of sucks because I mean it's not doing much. 45% health, recovery, bypass defensive buffs, and get 50% critical chance for 4 turns. You're not even giving your allies attack up, which is something that's really something that's lacking in Flip. But with the presence of Costume Zhuge Liang that's coming out, and with the prospect of maybe seeing Costume Liu Bei coming out in the future, the need for defensive buff bypassing suddenly becomes a bit more valuable. So you can kind of use this and pair Flip with another red hero that gives attack up. Say, for example, you're doing it, you're combining this with, say, Toon Boltas or Phonexa, for example. I think Phonexa does give attack up. Then it becomes very interesting because then your heroes start bypassing defensive buffs with their attacks, which means you don't get the damage from the counter attack, which is really, really good. So I think Flip, right now, Flip in the second row is probably one of the best heroes that you can pick from this slot. Thanatos is also very interesting. When you're looking at legendary troops, the fact that they only give 11% mana generation, mana bonus, means that you will need help if you're trying to get back to the usual way of having mana troops or magic troops in order for you to reach certain breakpoints. Thanatos does help that a lot with the first charge. Now, the first charge is slightly weaker than Myoini's one. But I do believe the second charge actually helps a bit, and the third charge is just insane if you can get it to third charge. Also, the fact that he resists ailments that affect defense can be quite resilient. It's just that the stats are again still a bit outdated. But yeah, definitely I think one of the higher ranking ones that I would choose from the second slot here. Like, I would still say Flip would probably be one of the best if you want to pick from this slot, and then maybe second would be Thanatos. Archie, now bear in mind this is the regular version of Archie, this is not the costume version. So if you're choosing Archie, bear in mind that you're not getting the costume, which means you won't get this kind of like stat increase. You're only getting the original version, which kind of sucks because now on paper it looks interesting. 250% damage to all enemies, immune to status effect buffs, and take 150 damage each attempted buff. There's not that much damage here, so you're using him more for utility, but at the same time he comes with a detriment as well. Negative 10% accuracy. Now negative 10% accuracy is fine, but we all know the placebo effects. As long as you have something that's negative on your side of things, the next time he fires, if it's within the 4 turns, there is a chance that he misses as well. So I'm not a fan of Archie here. I would rather use someone like El Nadaha. But then again, it's also because my experience with Archie, going against Archie, has not been too much of an issue. I think that the damage, not having enough damage here, it's costing him quite a bit. So not really a fan of Archie here. I think in this case Flip will be the best, followed by Thanatos, and then maybe Becky or Constance. I wouldn't consider picking Archie here. Okay, the last row. Rochefort, I think, is one of the best picks. If you don't have a Rochefort and you can get Rochefort to second limit break, this he hits really hard on one target, and if that target dies within the next 3 turns, all enemies take a certain amount of damage, which is really, really interesting. There's a lot of theory crafting that you can do with this. There's a lot of strategies that you can play around with this. You can even do Rochefort and Toon Domitia. You can use Rochefort first and then use Toon Domitia to kind of eliminate any hero that's that's holy, or you just do a 3 stack where you try to use Costume Guardian Panther to kind of get everybody to be slightly damaged, and then you use Rochefort and use another hero to kind of try to wipe out some of these some of the heroes that are on the board. So really interesting hero. I think it's even usable in challenge events right now. Really good to min-max, I think, scores, especially where elemental resistance becomes an issue. Rochefort is really strong at that as well. So I think Rochefort is one of the stronger picks here. Queen Guowang. Now I know a lot of people like Queen Guowang just because of the Vengeance ability. But remember, Vengeance can only be dispelled. Enemies take damage only if Vengeance is dispelled by a special skill. So Equalizer doesn't work on Vengeance. What you can do is you can use Queen Guowang and then you use Guardian Gazelle. It will dispel the Vengeance, and then all enemies take 525 damage. Now imagine this is only 525 damage as opposed to Rochefort's 952 damage. So Not really a fan of Queen Guo Wang. There was a time where she was really really good as a tank or a flank, but I do believe her time is up. There's just not much damage here. You would rather use Chang'e over Queen Guo Wang. Even though this all allies get 10% mana every time an enemy uses their special skill. Remember, if you want to pair Queen Guo Wang with Guardian Gazelle to get the vengeance going off, then your allies will not get this buff, this 10% mana every time. They won't get this status effect. So it's kind of anti-synergistic. You got to find a way to kind of dispel Queen Guo Wang's vengeance only, which is really hard to do. So, and her damage is not too significant anymore. So I'm not a fan of Queen Guo Wang. I know a lot of people like her and will still go for her, but personally, I think Rochefort is still much better. Hypnos, the old Styx hero conundrum. Really, really strong hero. One of the best in terms of utility. I'm just sad that his stats are just so bad right now. Like when you're looking, and I'm looking at this only from like top tier play. I'm sure there are some people who are still using Hypnos. It's just bear in mind that he's not going to deal that much of damage. That's all. But the utility is one of the best, I think, in this 20 hero slot. The first skill, being able to stop them from having any status effect buffs at very fast speed, is really strong. And then at 9 tiles, you're basically dispelling buffs from all enemies first before forcing them not to be taking any status effect buffs for 3 turns. And then the third charge is the same thing, except it's even more debilitating in terms of the number of turns that they do not get status effect buffs. So if you're looking for a hero that can dispel first before dealing damage or before putting any ailments, Hypnos is your guy. But do bear in mind that his stats are also a bit outdated. So tread with caution, I guess. Cell. Now Cell is really interesting. Being a slow hero but having a super massive minion, 40% HP, 50% attack. Nobody gives a shit about the attack, but the stone skin is very very annoying. I remember going against a lot of Cell. There was a time in Rush Wars where everybody was just flanking Cell, and it was so difficult to get rid of stuff because you don't really want to use minion killers in Rush Wars. There are not that many minion killers anyways. Sure, you can use Grimble, you can use what do you call it, Galapago, or you can use Ojima, but I mean Cell is nuts. Like the rock golem minion is it's really annoying to deal with, even in regular wars as well. If you accidentally let her fire once, it's so difficult to get rid of the minions, especially if you can pair this properly with, like, say, maybe the War of the Three Kingdom costumes as well. Yeah, Cell is a really really interesting choice here as well. I used to think she was, very very not favorite, not really one of my favorite mascots to choose from, but the more I face Cell, the more I realize that she can be a really 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 annoying prick. And in offense teams, if you know how to pair her correctly, if you pair her, say, with like Ludwig, for example, and you're getting rock golem minions every 2 turns, it's not funny. Imagine if you can stagger the rock golem minions, the stone skin given by the rock golem minions. Your whole team is basically unkillable, and it's a really strong combination to go with any glass cannon heroes. So yeah, one of the better picks here as well. I think the third slot definitely has quite a bit potential in terms of heroes. Even the last one, Zandrella here. Zandrella is one of the early super elemental heroes. I think she came out the same time as Roz as well. Average speed 450% damage to the target and all ice enemies. You don't really care about the damage. What you care about is this, I don't know what you call it. I think it's like it's not really a mindless attack, but it's something where you just deal 651 damage to yourself every time you get full mana, and then you reduce that mana by 50%. So it's a really strong controller, especially if the blue meta continues. When you're facing, tanks like Nautica, you're facing tanks like Grimsteel, where they have Timaeus on the wing. Even when you have there's Costume Cao, where people are placing him in the flank or the wing. And then for Rush Wars, where you're dealing with Milady de Winter, you're dealing with Nautica, you're dealing with Grimsteel, these are where Zandrella can shine. And remember, she also alters the power of all nature shields on the board, so which means the next time you cast, you want to try to charge Zandrella, she actually charges faster. So really strong hero. The only problem is I do believe whenever you try to have a controller, the controller should always be fast speed. But average speed now with the legendary troops is almost similar to fast speed, so not too much of a difference there, and I think Zandrella can be really strong here. So if I were to rank the 20 hero slot here, I think Rochefort by far, I think it should be number 1 in terms of the choices because of how versatile he can be. Second will probably, against my better judgment, should be Cell, just on how good the minions are. Hypnos and Zandrella will probably share third place just because Hypnos, the utility is there, Zandrella, the utility is there as well, and then finally the lowest rank here. I think the lowest in terms of pick priority will probably be Queen Guowang here. Again, I need to emphasize, remember that the Soul Exchange heroes are not always the heroes that are currently in the meta, but can warp and try to adjust your teams to counter the current meta that is happening right now. So I hope this gives you guys an informed decision and enough information to kind of make your picks. Remember, there's about two and a half days left, so take your time, consider what you need in your roster, and choose from there. Again, do not follow blindly what other people are saying. Just because one hero is the best for them doesn't mean it is the best for you. You got to look at your roster and figure out whether you need a support, whether you need an attacker, or whether you need someone to just be an all-rounder, dealing damage but at the same time providing some form of utility as well. So I hope that helps. And as for me, well, it was a toss-up. I was gonna pick either Zandrella or Hypnos. It was between Hypnos, Zandrella, and actually Nemesis. And I rolled the dice, and the dice fell on Zandrella, so that's who I've actually gotten. So my pick was actually Zandrella. She would be fun to use in Rush Wars, but I don't have any materials to level up any green heroes right now, so she's gonna be in the bench for quite a while. So I hope this video is helpful for you, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. GG.